Okay, good morning. This is Miss Megan, the nutrition educator for Greater Newark Conservancy, getting ready for Family Fun in the Kitchen, which will start in about a minute. So hopefully some people start joining. Okay, I see one person. So, as I'm waiting for people to join, just want to mention that feel free to comment. I can see everything, so if you have questions, you can type those in and I'll respond to them as I see them. Or if you can just type comments, let me know how your recipe is turning out. And give it a couple of minutes. Let some more people join. Okay. So I'll just finish gathering up my materials here, and then we'll get started in just a minute. Okay. Alright, well, I will get started, and hopefully more people will keep joining. It's 11 o'clock now. So, good morning again. My name is Miss Megan, and I'm really excited to be doing a Facebook Live Family Fun in the Kitchen. It's not the same as being in the same room with everyone, but I'm really glad that we can still cook together from our own homes. So, this is the second Facebook Live Family Fun in the Kitchen. Last month, in April, I made hummus. So this month, we are going to make lettuce tacos. And I'll tell you why I chose that recipe in a minute, but let me make sure that you have everything you need to make this recipe. So let's just go through the ingredients. I posted them on social media the other day, so hopefully you've gathered all your ingredients. But let's just go through them, make sure you have everything. So the first thing I'm going to make is a cilantro sauce. So for that, you're going to need a whole bunch of cilantro, 1 or 2 limes. I'm going to do 2 because they are on the small side and I really like lime juice. And then you'll need some olive oil and salt. So that's the first thing we're going to make, is this cilantro sauce. Then you also want to make sure that you have all the toppings for your tacos. So obviously it's totally up to you. What I'm going to use as toppings, I have red onion. I really like some raw red onion. I'm going to cut up a tomato. Avocado, of course. I have to have avocado. And then I have some kind of old beat up radishes, but that's okay, they're still good, they'll go in. And then a green onion or scallion. So those are gonna be my taco toppings. You might have some other ones. You might wanna add cheese to yours, cheddar cheese. You might wanna add other veggies as well, depending on what you have at home. Okay, and then the only thing we're going to cook, so a lot of this recipe is raw, but I am going to do a little bit of cooking. So the last thing I'm going to do is cut up a small onion and a half of a green bell pepper. I'm going to cut those up and saute them. And then I'm also going to add black beans. So one of the great things about this recipe is that it's really flexible and customizable. So you can use whatever protein you like. I happen to like black beans, so I'm going to add these. As you can see, I've already drained and rinsed them. So if you're going to use beans, you might want to go ahead and do that now. Open your can, drain and rinse the beans. You always want to rinse them because they're usually packed in sodium or salt, so you want to get rid of some of that sodium. So go ahead and drain and rinse beans if you're using those. But again, the great thing about this recipe, you could use a different type of bean, you could use tofu, lentils, meat, chicken or beef, so whatever protein you want to use. I'm going to use black beans today. So those are the main ingredients, and then the last thing I'll make sure that you all have are some of the different seasonings and flavorings. So again, you don't have to use all of these, but I'm going to use chili powder, some cayenne to make it a little spicy. You don't have to use that. Cumin is a good taco seasoning. I'll use some paprika, and then I'm also going to add a little bit of low sodium soy sauce and a little bit of balsamic vinegar. And then last but not least, of course, I'm going to use garlic. So I've got 3 garlic cloves here. So those are all the ingredients that I'm going to use today. Oh, and of course, I can't forget about the lettuce, right? So I am fortunate to have a little bit of space to grow where I live. Good morning, more people are joining, that's great. Thank you for joining. So I'm fortunate where I live that I have a little bit of space to grow, not much, I just have containers. So I have some homegrown lettuce. So whatever type of lettuce that you want to use, romaine works well because it's pretty, it's more stiff as opposed to the loose leaf lettuce, which is kind of floppy, doesn't make the best taco base. So romaine works well if you have that, or butterhead, also known as Bibb or Boston lettuce. That also works well because it's more of a bowl shape, so it holds your taco filling well. So I would say if you have romaine or butter lettuce, but whatever type of lettuce you have will work. Okay, so that's all the ingredients. Hopefully you've gathered your ingredients. Now, of course, the first thing we have to do before we cook is, what do we have to do? We have to wash our hands, right? So I've already washed my hands, but make sure you go ahead and do that if you haven't already. So make sure you wash your hands. And go ahead and drain and rinse your beans if you need to do that. And then I also want to mention, if you want, for the cilantro sauce, if you want to throw all of this in a food processor or a blender, you can do that. It'll make it really smooth. So if you want to grab your blender, I'm just going to chop it up by hand. No electricity needed. So that will work as well. Okay, so let's get started. So hopefully you've washed your hands, you are gathering your ingredients. So let me just tell you why I chose this recipe, and then we'll dive in. So, why lettuce tacos? So I chose this for a bunch of reasons. Did anybody tune in to Miss Sarah's Second Saturday 2 weeks ago? So if you did, you may remember that Miss Sarah's Second Saturday program was all about how you can regrow food scraps, right? So that's a really cool way to save a trip to the grocery store and also reduce food waste, right? So she was showing you how you could regrow scallions or green onions, how you can regrow lettuce and herbs and things like that. Good morning. More people are joining. That's great. Thank you for joining. I'm using some of those same vegetables that Miss Sarah used. So if you've been trying to regrow any of your own food scraps, that's really great. Another reason I chose this recipe is it's seasonally appropriate. So it uses lettuce, which is in season right now, and scallions, and things like that. And then I also wanted to make a vegetarian recipe. So you can use meat to make tacos, of course. But it's also really tasty if you make it with beans or lentils or tofu and make it vegetarian. So beans are super nutritious. They've got tons of different nutrients. And then, of course, this recipe is loaded with veggies, so you can't really go wrong with that. I wanted to use a recipe that utilizes pantry staples, so hopefully these were mostly things that you already had at home. I know I always have canned beans. Oh, good morning. So Jacob just joined. Thank you for joining. Remember, if you have questions, feel free to type those in, and I'll try to answer them. So I wanted to use a recipe that has pantry staples, so hopefully you already had a can of beans at home. Hopefully you had some of these veggies on hand, and these spices in your spice cabinet. So I didn't want to make anything that's too complicated or too expensive. So, and last but not least, I wanted to make a recipe that utilizes some of the superhero foods. So those of you who have cooked with me before or have watched any of my Learn About Lead videos, you know that there are certain foods that protect you from lead. And if you want, you could type in what some of those foods are. So if you remember what they are, go ahead and type it in, and we'll talk about it more a little bit later. But so a lot of reasons why I wanted to make this recipe, so I hope you all like it. Okay, so let's get started. So we have clean hands. Now, the first thing I'm actually going to make this recipe backwards. I'm going to start with the sauce, which you'll drizzle onto your tacos at the end. So let's start with that. Now, we need to review knife skills, and those of you who have cooked with me before, you already know what to do, so feel free to type it in if you remember, but let's just kind of review step by step what we need to do to cut safely. So, we've got our knife. Now, remember, depending on how old your child is, they could use a butter knife or a plastic knife, but even young children can use knives, especially if an adult is supervising them. Okay, so whether you've got your sharp knife or your butter knife, how do we want to hold that safely? So we want to hold the handle right up at the blade. So you don't want to hold it all the way at the end. You won't have a lot of control that way, right? So you want to hold it right close to the blade with a nice firm grip with your dominant hand. So I'm left-handed, but a lot of you will be holding it with your right hand. Okay, so nice firm grip. And then we want to make sure that we're cutting safely. So what's the best way to cut safely on the cutting board? So you either want to do this seesawing motion. So you'll notice that the knife is always in contact with the cutting board. So you can make this seesawing motion, or you could just saw back and forth like this. So those are two good ways to cut safely, where the knife is always in contact with the cutting board. Okay? All right, and now, how do we hold the food that we're going to cut? So I know a lot of you know this. So if you want to type it in and remind everybody. So how do we hold, so I'll start with a lime, right? So how do I hold this safely to cut it? Good morning. Some more people are joining. I see Miss Brown has joined. Thank you for joining. So how do we want to hold this lime? Y'all remember? So you want to make a bear claw, right? So nice fierce bear claw. Hi Mom, thanks for joining. All right, so let's make a nice fierce bear claw. We're going to hold the lime like that, and that way, when we cut it, our fingertips are protected, right? All right, so let's go ahead and cut our lime. So I'm going to cut this in half, and I'm using 2 limes. I'll cut them both in half. Okay, so now if you're making this in the blender, you can squeeze it into the blender. I'm just going to make this sauce right into this bowl. So go ahead and you can squeeze your lime into the bowl. So use your Hulk strength and get all that juice out of the lime. So you want to get all that juice out, squeeze it in the bowl. All right, and yeah, exactly. So you want a nice bear claw. Keep your fingers safe. Okay. And then what are we going to do with these lime rinds when we're done with them? So if you're able to compost, that's great. I've got my compost bag right back here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, so after you've squeezed every ounce of juice out of that lime, okay, next thing we're going to do is chop up the cilantro. So what I'm going to do is cut the leaves off the stems. Now, what could I do with the stems? Some of the stems will end up in the sauce, and that's fine. You can use the stems. But what could I do with the very bottom of these stems? So we could do what Miss Sarah did 2 weeks ago, and we could put these in water and try to regrow them. So that would be kind of cool if I could get more cilantro out of these. So that's one option. Or you could compost these if you have compost. But it's okay if you have stems with the leaves. That's totally fine. It's all getting chopped up, so it all tastes good. So what I like to do is kind of roll up the cilantro. And then remember, we're doing this back and forth. I'm holding it with my claw so I don't. And now I'm going to switch to a seesaw motion. And I want to make this cilantro as finely chopped as I can. If you're using a food processor, that works too. That'll do the work for you. But I'm going to try to make this as small as I can, because I'm going to make kind of a sauce out of it with the lime juice and olive oil and salt. So that's going to go on the tacos at the very end. Okay, more people are joining. So it's good to see you all. Thank you for tuning in on your Saturday morning. Okay, so how small can you make your cilantro? It's going to take a lot of seesawing back and forth, unless you've already blended it. Maybe you're ahead of me. Okay, so hopefully at this point you can smell all the cilantro aroma that's being released from cutting it. It smells really fresh and great. Okay, so once you've made your cilantro pretty small, so you're doing this seesawing motion. So you see my knife isn't leaving the cutting board. So now I'm just going to throw that in the bowl with the lime juice. Okay. All right, so now I've got cilantro, I've got lime juice. I'm not actually gonna really measure it, but I'm gonna pour about a tablespoon of olive oil in there. I'm gonna sprinkle a little salt. And now we are gonna let that sit while we prep everything else. So I'm gonna mix this up a little bit. And we're gonna let all these flavors meld while we make the rest of the recipe. Okay, so we've got our sauce here. So I'm gonna set this aside. That's the last thing we need. Okay. So the next thing I want to put together, I want to get all of our seasonings now. Okay. All right. So what I'm gonna do next is add all of my seasonings to this small bowl. So make sure you grab a tablespoon measure and then a teaspoon and a half teaspoon if you have those. Or you can also kind of use however much you want, but I'll show you how much I'm going to use. Hi Ramona, thanks for joining. Okay, so I'm going to start with the garlic, my favorite flavor of all time. I'm going to use 3 cloves. Now, as you can see, my garlic is kind of growing on its own, but that's okay. So, does anybody remember what's an easy way to peel garlic? I know there are different ways to do it, but how do you peel garlic? So, I think the easiest way is to take the flat side of the knife and press down with the palm of your hand, press down on the garlic clove, and crush it. And then it's pretty easy to take the peel off, take the wrapper off, as it were. Okay, so we're going to peel the garlic and mince it. So you can use however much garlic you want. I'm using 3 cloves. Maybe you want to use a little bit less. Alright, so again, I'm going to use this kind of seesawing motion to mince the garlic. I'm not going to hold the garlic with a bear claw because I don't really need to. Alright, so you're mincing your garlic. And remember, if you haven't already, gather whatever spices you want to use. So I'm going to use chili powder, paprika, cumin, and cayenne. And then I'm also going to throw in some soy sauce and balsamic vinegar just for a little extra flavor. Oh, good, you're making it for lunch. I think that's the perfect thing to do. This is like the perfect lunch. And we're coming up on lunchtime. So, okay. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so chopped up my garlic and I'm gonna add it to this little bowl. And then I'm gonna add all of the other spices and seasonings. Okay, so now let's review some measuring. So again, this doesn't have to be exact, but I'll give you the measurements I use in case you want to use the same measurements. You can use more or less of any of these things, of course. So I'm going to start with a teaspoon of chili powder. Okay, so I've got my teaspoon measure. So you can either scoop it in the bottle if it fits, or you can just pour it out. You don't want to waste too much by spilling it, but so when we're measuring, we want to make sure it's a level spoonful, right? So it should, I don't want a heaping teaspoon here of chili powder, just a level spoonful. But again, it doesn't have to be exact. You can use more or less. Okay, so I'm going to do a teaspoon of chili powder. And then I'm going to do a teaspoon of cumin. Okay, so I like to shake it in the container so I don't get cumin everywhere. So now I have a level teaspoon. And then I'll do a half teaspoon of paprika. You don't need as much paprika. So I've got my level, actually it's a little much, my level half teaspoon of paprika. And then I'm just going to shake in some cayenne pepper to add a little bit of kick. You can leave that out if you want. And now I'm going to add the liquid. So I'll do a tablespoon of low sodium soy sauce. So we want to slowly pour in here. Get soy sauce. So I'm adding all of these things to the same bowl because it's all going to go in at the same time. And then, last but not least, I'm going to add some balsamic vinegar. So slowly pour it in there. Got a level spoonful. add it to the bowl. Okay. So now I've got my garlic, my spices, and my soy sauce and balsamic vinegar. Ooh, all right, so Ramona's making it with lentils. That sounds really good. Lentils are definitely one of my favorite things, so that sounds like that'll be good. Okay, so now we've got our cilantro sauce, we've got our flavors. We're not going to need measuring spoons anymore, so I'm going to get those out of the way. The next thing I'm going to do is quickly cut up a few toppings, so I don't have to worry about that later. So I'm going to use, for my toppings, I'm going to use tomato. So these aren't going to be cooked, these are just going to be added at the end. Tomato, avocado, radishes for a little spicy bite, and scallion. And I think that's it for today, actually. But is anybody going to use any different toppings than what I'm using? So now we're going to safely cut these up. So hopefully my avocado is still good. I've had these in the fridge for a few days, so it might be a little brown. That's okay. It'll still taste good. Actually, it's not too bad, fortunately. So I'm just gonna kind of slice up the avocado from within. So is anybody gonna use any different toppings than what I'm using? So cheese is another good topping. I'm not gonna use cheese today, but you could add cheese to yours, right? Yeah, avocados are definitely my favorite. So you can use separate bowls, but I'm just going to add all of my toppings to this bowl. Just going to squeeze out the avocado. Because I don't mind mixing them. Again, they're all going to the same place. So now I'm going to cut up some tomato. So in general, if you can square off your surfaces, so when you have something round like a tomato, you don't want it rolling around on the cutting board, it's good to cut it in half, and then you've made a flat surface, and then you cut with it flat side down, and then it's less likely to roll around and make it harder to cut. Alright, so we're using our bear claw, we're cutting up our toppings. I'm going to add all of these to this bowl for the end. I'm going to add some red onion. Okay. And then I'm going to add radishes, because radishes are a nice spring veggie as well. So some of you might be growing radishes at home. Alright, so Anna said, I might leave out cilantro. Oh, you're one of those people who doesn't like it. Yes, I know not everybody likes cilantro. And that's okay, you can totally leave it out. You could just add some lime juice at the end. Okay, yes, let me cut up a radish, and then I think I'm good with toppings. But if there's anything else you're going to add, that's great. Okay. Adding some radish. Alright, and now let's get to the part where we actually start cooking a little bit. So, the only things I'm cooking today are yellow onion or white onion. I'm using a small one. Half of a bell pepper. And I'm just going to saute those on the stove for a few minutes. Okay, so I don't think I'm going to chop these up all the way. I'm going to kind of slice them and still leave them a little bit long. I think that's fine. But you can make them really small if you want, bite-sized pieces. Okay, so I'm gonna add pepper to the skillet. So I've already added olive oil to the skillet. So then same thing with the onion, I'm gonna cut it in half. And then with the flat side down, I'm just gonna slice it. I'm not gonna mince it. I'm gonna make long slices. But if you want, you can mince it or dice it, make it smaller if you prefer. Alright, so I've got these slices of onion. Alright, so what I'm going to do is saute these for a few minutes over medium. So while those are cooking, make sure you have your beans ready. If you're using beans, so I'm using canned black beans, so they don't really need to cook for very long, which is super handy. So all I'm going to do is add them after these have sauteed for a few minutes. They only need to heat up for like 3 minutes and then they're ready to go, which is pretty great. If you're using meat or lentils, you'll have to cook those separately. So, alright, these are going to saute for a few minutes. While that's going on, if you have any questions, I know I'm talking a lot, feel free to type in your questions if you have any that I could answer. But I also want to tell you a little bit more about superhero foods, especially for those of you with pre-K students out there. So on Greater Newark Conservancy's website, we have a whole page devoted to our lead-safe early care program. And we've been producing videos about lead, and we also have resources on there that you can download. So make sure to check that out. But I want to make sure that everybody knows that there are a lot of ways you can protect yourself from lead, but one great way to do that is by how you eat. So there are certain superhero foods that actually can protect you from lead, which is pretty cool. So does anybody remember what any of those superhero foods are? I think I mentioned some of them last month, if you tuned in last month. So foods that have foods that have calcium, iron, and vitamin C. Don't worry, I'm not ignoring this. Foods that have calcium, iron, and vitamin C are good choices. So, what do those include? So, what foods have calcium? So, oh, I see somebody put, my son loves broccoli. So, broccoli is actually a good source of calcium. So if you have broccoli and you want to chop some up and add that to your tacos today, that would be great. So dairy is a good source of calcium, so milk, cheese. So in this case, for your tacos, if you're adding some cheddar cheese, you're getting some calcium, so that's great. Then what about iron? What are good sources of iron? So beans are a good source of iron. So that's one of the reasons why I chose black beans for this recipe today. And then red meat's a good source of iron as well. And then finally, vitamin C. So where do you get vitamin C from? So I think people usually think of citrus and orange juice. So citrus is a good source of vitamin C. So remember we added limes today, lime juice. But in general, colorful fruits and vegetables are a good source of vitamin C. So, for example, strawberries. We're not adding strawberries to our tacos, but strawberries are a good source of vitamin C. Tomatoes, which I'm adding tomatoes to mine. Bell peppers. So we're sauteing our bell peppers now. So those are some good sources of vitamin C. So those are some of the superhero foods that we can eat to protect ourselves from lead. So this lettuce taco recipe has a lot of those superhero foods, especially if you're adding cheese. So I wanted to make sure to incorporate some of those. Okay, so if you're sauteing your peppers and onions along with me, your kitchen is probably smelling good right now, right? That's always a good smell. So it's good to saute peppers and onions for about 5 minutes, just until they get soft. So once the onions start to become translucent, so what does translucent mean? So once they turn from white or yellow to clear, then you know that they're soft enough. Okay, so this is smelling really good. So the next thing we're going to add, in about another minute, I'm going to add all of those seasonings that I measured out, the garlic, the spices, the soy sauce, and vinegar. So I'm going to add that next for just about a minute. And then I'm going to add the black beans. And then we will be ready to assemble. So hopefully you cut up all the toppings that you want to add. Get your lettuce ready. So I've got I think I need a bigger plate actually. I've got my romaine lettuce here, and then I also have some loose leaf lettuce just for fun. Oh, and you know what else I want to add? I'm going to add some spinach to mine. So spinach tastes great raw or cooked. So either you could chop it up and throw it in with the beans while they cook, or you could add it raw at the end, whatever you prefer. I think I'll just add mine, well, I think I'm going to add mine with the beans and let them cook a little bit. So I'm just going to chop it up a little bit. You don't have to chop it up too much because spinach cooks down so much. So I just made it a little bit smaller. Alright, I think my peppers and onions are good. So now, once your peppers and onions are soft, you can add the flavorings. So I'm going to add the garlic and the spices, the soy sauce, and the balsamic vinegar. So I'm going to add that in. You want to let that cook for about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. Just let the spices release some of their flavor. Okay. And then I'm going to add my black beans. So I know somebody said they're using lentils. Is anybody using a different type of protein besides black beans or lentils? I'll have to try lentils next time. That sounds good. Alright, so I've got my drained and rinsed black beans. I'm going to throw those in now. Well, I'm going to gently pour them in now. Okay. So, kids, if you're helping your parents cook, just be careful when you're working with the stove. Make sure you don't touch the pan. The pan's going to be really hot, so you don't want to touch that and burn yourself. So just touch the handle. And in general, you want to turn the handle in when you're cooking, if you can, so you don't bump into it and knock it off the stove. So I'm just going to stir everything together. So now we've got our onions and peppers, our garlic and spices, and our black beans. And I'm going to add the spinach, sprinkle that on top. So hopefully everything is smelling good on your stove right now. This just needs another couple of minutes to cook, and then we're going to assemble our tacos. So again, at home, the great thing about this recipe is you can really customize it however you want. So even for the whole family, every family member can add something different to their tacos. You can personalize it. So that's one of the great things about making tacos in general. You can change it up however you want. Use different proteins. Okay, and if you're making this along with me, make sure that you take pictures and you can post them to Instagram or Facebook and tag us. So it does smell yummy, right? Yeah, I know it smells good in my kitchen right now. So if you want to post a picture on Instagram, you can tag us at CityBloom87. You can tag us on Facebook too, and we'll share them. So I would love to know how all your tacos turned out and how you change it up, what toppings you use and what protein you use. Alright, so let me get this out of the way so I can assemble my tacos. Okay. Alright, so I think I'm going to use the romaine. I'm going to make 2 tacos here. Alright, so I think this is good to go. So now what I'm going to do is assemble everything together. So I'm going to take some of this mixture, the bean, onion, pepper, everything's in there, and I'm just going to add some to the middle of the lettuce. Okay, so just put some in the middle. You don't want to overload it or the poor lettuce will collapse and won't be able to hold it all. So add some to the middle of your lettuce. And then sprinkle some toppings. So I've got my radishes here. I've got some red onion to make it a little spicy. I've got my avocado and tomatoes. You know, I forgot to cut up the scallion, but that's okay. I'll add that later. Okay, so that looks good for toppings. And then I'm going to add some of this cilantro sauce on top. So if you made it in a blender, it's going to be a lot smoother. But however it turned out, I'm sure it's good. So it's got the cilantro, it's got lime juice, olive oil, and a little bit of salt. You don't really need salt if you added soy sauce, because that's already salty. Okay, and we've got our lettuce tacos. So, should we try them and see how they turned out? Alright, this might be a little messy, but I'm going to take a bite, see how it turned out. Okay, so you can fold it together. Hopefully you have some good lettuce that can really hold it together. Okay. Alright, well, I'm pretty happy. I think that turned out good. How did it turn out for everyone else? Has anyone tried it yet? Well, you'll have to let me know what you think of it. So we went over a lot today. We reviewed our knife skills and our measuring skills. We talked about superhero foods and why this is a good recipe to make. I want to remind you all to visit our website. Not only do we have the lead page of our website, but we also have an at-home resources for families page where we've been posting videos, not just about lead, not just about cooking, but also about gardening. So I know a lot of people are gardening at home now more than ever. You don't need a lot of space to do it, so if you have gardening questions, you can always ask us about those. We are still giving away seed packets preference to Newark families. So if you want seeds, you can let us know. We have a request form on our website. Remember to follow us on social media, on Instagram at CityBloom87 and on Facebook. And if you made these lettuce tacos or your own version of the lettuce tacos today, I hope you'll take a picture and post it and tag us. And I hope you enjoyed the recipe and cooking today. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer while we're all on here together? Okay, well, if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us on social or email me. But thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you had fun and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. And I'll see you all next time. So thanks, everyone. Bye.